My guest this morning is Krista Cook. And Krista Cook knew she wanted to be a writer since she was just 3 years old. Actually, that answered one of my first questions. She spent her life making decisions to put herself in a position to achieve her dream. And in July 2020, Cook's first novel, I Hate Gray, was published by Leeds Press Corporation. Cook arrived at Columbia from the suburbs of Detroit in 2014 and consistently journaled her experiences, thoughts, and observations of starting college and moving away from home. She started at Columbia as a journalism major but switched to public relations so she would be able to help to be comfortable with speaking in front of others, pitching her work to the media and market herself as a writer. All right, well, Krista, welcome to the Reading Circle microphones. Good morning to you.
Good morning. Thank you for having me.
Oh, thank you for rising early because I know you're calling out of Chicago. You're an hour behind me. So while it is 7 o'clock or 7:04 here, it is 6:04 there, correct?
That's correct, but I'm not actually an early riser, so this is nowhere near inconvenient.
All right, so you're okay. You're early. All right, that works. So you're an early riser. That will work. So again, I thank you for joining me. And as we were talking a couple of minutes ago, your brief bio that I read there kind of answered my first question, but I'm going to let you talk about that in terms of, where did it all begin? And you're talking about knew that you wanted to be a writer since you were 3. Now, it was interesting that last piece about, being able to speak publicly because you're on the radio. You're going to be speaking publicly. Now, the good news is I taught public speaking or I teach public speaking at the college level, and I'm telling you, you have nothing to fear. So right now, this conversation is just like if me and you were on the telephone.
Exactly.
So
I feel comfortable.
Good. That is my objective is to make all of my guests feel comfortable. And I've been on the air now for 21 years. This is going into my 22nd season. And I always strive to make all of my guests feel very comfortable. So I'm glad you feel that way. So let's talk a little bit about this wanting to be a writer since you were 3. Talk to us a little bit about that.
So I used to just always tell stories. To my grandparents, parents, anybody who would listen, actually. And then I began to write them. It kind of first started off as something that I would just go around making up, telling people things. And I remember just being ready to write them all out. Now, as a younger child, I was gifted, and I didn't really know how to navigate that. Even when I started kindergarten, I don't really think my teacher was able to handle me either because in kindergarten, I used to do half day in kindergarten and half day in first grade because they were trying to get me promoted to skip and go a little bit faster. Even in kindergarten, I would just literally just write up children's stories.
Do you remember those children's stories? Do you remember any of them?
I do not remember most of them. I do remember briefly the story that I did in one of the Reading Rainbow contests. I think I was in 3rd grade. I don't know where the concept came from, but I thought it was a really cool idea to write about 2 Japanese twins who travel in space and they were jewel thieves. I don't know where I got the idea from, but I just kind of took it and ran with it.
Now, this is I tell people all the time, some of the most successful people on the planet, and I'm not saying everybody has to do this, but some of the most successful people on the planet knew what they wanted to do at a young age, and they were able to follow their path. Now, again, I'm not saying because that age-old question to kids are, what do you want to be when you grow up? And, some kids, they know, and some kids I don't know. I have no idea. But I see here with you now, knowing you wanted to be a writer for such a young age, did that allow you now to set your course in terms of what classes you took? I know elementary school and middle school really can't set them too much, but high school you can, and certainly college you can. Did that kind of guide what courses you now enrolled in because you knew you wanted to be a writer?
Yes. I took a lot of creative writing courses and marketing classes in high school specifically too. Intro to marketing. I was in DECA, which is a marketing, I don't know how to explain it. It's
No, I know DECA well because my sister was in it.
So
That's a distributive education. Yes.
Yes. I was in DECA in high school, and I just loved, outside of writing, I loved brand communications. That got me really excited because I always feel like very connected to the brands I like, and I always wanted to figure out if I ever wanted to create a brand for myself or if I ever wanted to become a brand myself, how would that start? How would I market myself? What would be my target market? All these things interested me, like I said, from a young age. I think I started DECA when I was 14 or 15. And from there, senior year of high school came, I did half days at North Farmington High School in Farmington Hills, Michigan. And then I will go to Oakland School's technical campus as well, where I studied heavy marketing courses.
Now that's interesting because my undergrad, my first degree, my bachelor's degree is in business administration. And it was a concentration in marketing and advertising, because I've always been fascinated with this whole notion of being able to persuade people, because it's like, I mean, because of the background, it's very hard for any marketer to persuade me. Either I want what I want or I don't what I don't, but you're not going to give me this pitch that you're going to think that's what swayed me, because it really didn't. I mean, because I know the game. So it sounds like what I'm hearing from you is, with your marketing background, you actually kind of know the game, but the flip side of that is we also know what to say to persuade people.
That's true. And a lot of marketing, advertising, and PR, we're storytellers.
Correct.
We just do it in a different form than putting the pen to paper and someone reading our story. We are giving visuals. We're taking people through a brand journey. And a lot of people were confused oftentimes, like, oh, I thought you wanted to write. But little did they know that my storytelling skills set a base and almost like a better way of success for me to be successful within the communications world.
Oh, no question. Because, see, this is the thing. Communication and writing and all that, they are connected. Whenever I was working in a large corporation, I actually used to write telemarketing scripts. People don't know that the person on the other end is actually working off of a script. They're not just talking from the start to talking, that folks actually write scripts, going back again in terms of persuading. So you're absolutely right. It's no surprise to me that one contributed to the other. In other words, there's no reason why you wouldn't be able to be a writer if you were writing copy or writing anything for marketing or PR. So it doesn't surprise me at all. So, all right. So you continue to follow your dream. As a matter of fact, the bio that I'm looking for is, the bio that I'm looking at, rather, I'm assuming is from your school. You were is it Columbia?
Yes. So I went to Columbia College, Chicago for my undergrad years.
And so again, going back to my question about major and your courses, all of that kind of went towards, or you were able to shape your education to fit your career. Because that's going back to my earlier statement. Kenny G, when he was like 10 years old, was watching the Ed Sullivan Show. That's an old show back in the 60s, 70s. Was watching the Ed Sullivan Show, had no idea what a saxophone was, but he saw someone playing that particular instrument, and he said, that's what I'm going to do. And from that point on, he set out to be one of the greatest saxophone players, and he achieved it. One of the greatest jazz saxophone players, Kenny G. Bill Clinton met John F. Kennedy when he was like 16, 17 years old, and he set his sights and said, I am going to be president of the United States one day. So from the point that he met John F. Kennedy, everything that he did was geared toward becoming president of the United States. And guess what? He became president of the United States with Kenny G.
That's
guess what?
amazing.
He became one of the top saxophone players in the world. So now I'm saying all that to say, you knew that you were wanting to be a writer since 3, and now you've already released 2 books, and you're only 25 years old.
Yes. Wow. Like, you put painting it like that. I never think about it like that. It's hard to think about it in that light when you're in it and you're doing it. Because when you set a goal and you have a goal and then you have more goals in your head after the ones you've already done, it's kind of hard to kind of take a step back and really look at it that way. I'm like, wow, I do have 2 books and I'm 25.
No, last week my guest, you probably heard me saying it was, and this was a lifelong. I knew this young lady before she was born because I knew her mom and her dad. She was 33, and she is the CEO of a nonprofit organization, and have been doing it since she was 23. So she started that nonprofit at 23. So this is another example for me of folks out there saying that young people don't do it, because, young people are always bashed. When I was young, we were bashed. Yes, young people are always... Yep.
Annoyed. I get very annoyed by that.
Mm-hmm. Young people are always bad. Oh, they're not doing anything. They're lazy. All they want to do is play video games, sit on the couch, listen to music. They don't want to do anything. So, but again, last week my guest was 33. She started her nonprofit at 23. Here you are now at 25, already with 2 books published. So that means surely there are more books to come, because God willing, you have a lot more time to go. So if you've gotten 2 done by 25, there's no telling what you'll have by 35, 45, 55, 65, so forth and so on. So your first book was I Hate. Matter of fact, let me back up a little bit, because you're considered, from what I understand, young adult author.
Yes.
Okay. So, and it makes sense because you're a young adult. But how did you choose that? How did you choose that genre?
I've always been relatively obsessed with young adult fiction, because before I really took writing seriously, I always journaled, even in like elementary school, middle school, but I didn't journal like regularly. That didn't happen until late high school, college. But in between the years before that, I was a heavy reader. Like, I spent most of my time in libraries checking out books, sometimes not returning them on time, which was kind of hard for me to do for whatever reason. But I was always checking out books, always reading. And I remember specifically in middle school, it was a series called The Click by Lacey Harrison. And I was just completely enamored by the series. I felt like I was in the book myself. I felt like I was going to the classes with them. You couldn't tell me I wasn't from Westchester, New York, like the girls that I was reading about. And from there, was like, okay, if I read something like this and I felt like I was with them, I felt like I was in a completely different world, even though I was in Michigan reading about upper middle class girls going through middle school problems in New York. I'm like, I want to create something like this too, where if I write something, I want people to feel like they're wherever the character is. I want them to feel like they're in that setting. If the character is eating something, I want to describe it in the way they feel like they can taste it too. Whatever smells, I want all their senses to be captured when I put the pen to paper. So being a heavy reader from such a young age really helped set the stage for my writing skills as well.
Well, I'm not surprised at that, because, again, the impetus of this show was to help folks, or to encourage folks to read more. That's when the show was put together 21 years ago. The station manager had that in mind, that he wanted to have a show about books with the hopes that it would encourage people to read more. I cannot tell you how many authors I've had on the show who were avid readers when they were young. There is a connection between reading and writing. Now, listening audience is bored of hearing this, and I know it, and I'm okay with it. But when I'm not doing radio, I'm a principal. That's what my day job is. I'm the principal of a school.
Oh, wow.
And in terms of, yes, thank you. In terms of trying to encourage my students to read more, that was one of the last thing I told them before we broke for summer break was, look, I'm expecting you to read at least, at minimum, 30 minutes per day during the summer. Now, you can read more, but I don't want you to read less. So it's not surprising to me in terms of you saying that you were an avid reader as a child as well, and the fact that now your reading kind of influenced or defined what type of author you wanted to be. So, listening audience, there are different genres of books. There's biographies, autobiographies, there's erotica, there's Christian, there's fiction, there's nonfiction. There's a whole list of genres of books. Young adult fiction is one of those genres. And that's the genre that Kristen writes in. She writes in the young adult fiction, and doesn't necessarily have to be fiction. It's just, her target audience are young adults. Now, what's the age group? Whenever we say YA, what kind is like the age group in there?
For my writing, I know like my target is typically 18 to 24, but I would say like 16 to 25. And the reason I say I would take it to 16 specifically is that was the age where I started really thinking about what type of woman I wanted to be. And I do think I started thinking about that earlier because I graduated high school at 16. So I was a little advanced. So I'm already getting college acceptance letters at 16, going to high school where people who are 18 in the same grade as me, picking out prom dresses, doing the whole 9 yards. But I was already thinking, like, okay, this is one step in my life, but I'm about to start college, and I'm no longer going to be a kid in my head. So I'm like, okay, I'm a girl now, but one day I will be a woman. What type of woman do I want to be? What do I want to dress like? What job do I want to have? What type of man would I like to end up with? Like, these were, like, loosely forming in my mind around that age specifically. And I truly believe you have to prepare for a stage of your life before you get there. So even those loose thoughts, even like forming some type of idea before you get to whatever next stage that is in your life is always pretty helpful. So before you're 18, that 16 to 17 is kind of where you're thinking about that age frame and what is it going to be like when you leave from home.
Well, okay, a couple of things there. Just the fact that you were at that age and thinking that maturely, I take my hat off to you because I work with kids every day, and there's a reason young people get bashed. Not always, not always that needs to be deserved, but there's not a whole lot who thinks the way that you just described. And then, that's okay too. But those of you who do, and I know another young lady, very good friend of mine, she did the same thing. She was in college by like 16. She was out in Pittsburgh, and now she's getting ready to go to NYU or somewhere over here in New York, one of the universities in New York. But she's always been kind of like the baby in the group because, and you probably experienced that same thing of being 2 years younger than the norm. But
yeah.
the fact that you were thinking that way, like at 16, we're like, well, what kind of woman do I want to be? What kind of man do I want to have? Like you said, you're preparing each time for your next level. Unfortunately and sadly, and I hope folks are listening that will kind of pass that along to their grandchildren or their children or whatever, or maybe some folks in that age group that you just mentioned are listening also. You cannot prepare enough. Because a lot of times we get ourselves in trouble by not preparing, which goes back to what I was saying. Everybody's not going to know at 3 what they want to do when they're grown. You did. And obviously that carried over in other areas of life also. So in terms of, and there's one other thing you said when we were talking in the last question, you were talking about being able to write so descriptively. Yes, for the reader, you need to, and I was having this conversation the other day. We as writers and speakers, we have to paint a picture for folks. Like they ought to be able to read our words or hear what we're saying and be able to close their eyes and act as if they were watching a movie.
And that's our job as the writer to make the reader feel that way, 100%. And it's even harder to do because there aren't any visuals. We just have the words and we just have the paper. Can we insert the reader into the scene? Can we make them feel included? Do we get them attached through not just the characters which are really important, development of characters, because everyone loves having a favorite character. Everyone
Correct.
loves having a character they can connect to, that they can root for, that they want to feel connected to. So if you can get a reader connected to a character, that's great. But can you also put them in the scene? That's something I always ask myself before I finish, because I typically write by chapter for the most part. I have an outline, and then I write it by chapter. And before I move on to the next chapter, I read my own words. And I'm like, okay, can I see what I'm saying? Can I hear the sounds specifically? If it's food included, can I taste everything when I'm touching it? Am I describing it in a way where you can feel like you're touching what the character's touching? So incorporating all 5 of those senses, it's kind of that simple sometimes. I write the 5 senses out. I'm like, okay, are all 5 senses touch? If I chose to incorporate them into a scene.
And see, again, that is critical. It's critical for the reader as much as it is for the writer, because as the writer, that is exactly your objective, is that, one, you want to draw them in, you want them to keep reading. And not only do you want them to keep reading, you know, when your next book come out, you want them like I can't wait to get Christian's next book because that last one was so hot. So that's the objective, is that you want to build that loyalty and folks following, like they can't wait to your next one. But I remember, because whenever I was a teacher years ago, I taught 8th grade language arts. That's what I taught. I taught 8th grade language art. And to this day, there's this one child, and I have no idea, because this is going back, let's see, 22 years ago, back in 2000, 2001, somewhere around there. This child was one of the most descriptive writers I had ever experienced, especially at that age. And her name is Natia Pipkin. I have no idea where Natia is to this day. I don't know if she's still alive. I don't know if she dead. I don't know if she married. I don't know where Natia is. All I know is during that time, and when she was in 8th grade, she was one of the most descriptive writers I had ever come across. And when you talk about painting a picture, this kid could do it. So you're absolutely right in terms of that's the objective. That's what you're looking to do. You want to draw them in. You want to get folks reading, and to the point where they don't want to put the book down. Like, I want to close the book, but I just got to see what's going to happen next. And that comes from word choice.
Mm-hmm. Your word choice is critical.
No, it is. And the other thing is, one of the reasons, now, it's good if a book has pictures in it, but I prefer books that doesn't have a picture, so I can insert my own characters in there. I can put Denzel Washington in there. I could put Morris Chestnut in a role. I could put Beyonce in a role. I could put Halle Berry in a role. I could put, Viola Davis in a role. I can, based on how the book is written, will bring folks to my mind as to if I were casting a movie, these are the folks who would play that role.
I love that you say that, because in I Hate Grace specifically, I avoided heavy description of what the characters look like, because I wanted people to imagine whoever they wanted to place in them. Now, in Growing in the Gray, I did switch my writing style a little bit, so there is a little bit more of a description of what the characters look like. But I don't know why I chose to do that the first time around. It was kind of just something I was experimenting with. I don't regret it necessarily, but I just wanted to do something different this time of Growing in the Gray.
Well, that's interesting. Have you ever, based on what you just said, have you ever gone back through what you wrote and sit there and say, wow, I don't even remember writing that, or I can't believe I wrote that, or certainly God or Spirit or whatever was working through me, because I don't even remember putting that to paper?
In my older work, yes. Specifically, I would say in a lot of my unpublished work and old journal entries, some days where I don't have anything to do at all, I'll open up a journal from 19 or 20. And I'm like, I don't even remember that happening to myself. I don't even remember feeling that way. This is maybe something I want to get published one day. It all feels like a journey and the experience, specifically where if I didn't write it, I wouldn't have remembered it at all. Because if you think about it, if someone asked you, what were you doing 5 years ago today, you probably wouldn't remember. We have a tendency to only remember really great things that happen to us, really bad things. But the mundane, everyday life, it just escapes our memory.
No, you're absolutely right. No, you talking about 5 years ago. If someone asked me what I did 5 minutes ago, I might struggle. But but no, you're absolutely right. Listening audience, I hope you've been with me since 6, but certainly since 7, as my guest this morning is Krista Cook. She has written 2 books, and she's only 25. And she has 2 books out there on the market already. She's a young adult author. That is the genre for right now. Because, sometimes authors, they don't stick to one genre. They may mix it up or may do other work. So do you have any thoughts in terms of, are you always going to stay YA? Is that your area, or do you intend to branch out and do other genres also?
My goal, specifically, Growing in the Gray, I want it to be a series. So I wanted to take you from Krista Clark's freshman year of college all the way to senior year, and maybe even do 1 year post-grad, because that first year post-grad is rough. And I did not have a guidebook, a roadmap, anything to get to that point either. And I was heavily unsatisfied, actually, during that time of my life, because I wanted to move to New York right after college. But that did not happen, and I'm still here. Most of the time in Chicago. I kind of bounced around a lot through the pandemic to really kind of test out different cities to see where I would like to go next. But as far as staying YA, I feel like those years of college and that first year post-grad really molded the woman I am today. So that's one series that I wanted to be complete, of about 4 to 5 books maybe. From there, I don't know if I want to write just adult fiction, or if maybe I might do middle grade. My little brother he's going into high school this fall, but a lot of his experiences have inspired me to think about writing about middle school. So that's another time where it's like all these stages of life preps you for the next. Middle school prepares you for high school is supposed to prepare you for college. And I want to reach the youth. I want them to feel well prepared. Because if they're not prepared either through the way they're brought up or experiences to their education, hopefully they can read something I have written and it has helped them, guide them, and put them on a better path to life than they probably would have been due to any other circumstances.
That's interesting, because one of the beauties about that is in many instances, a young person will listen to another young person before they listen to an older person. And so the fact that you can reach them, if they can now feel like, okay, she's young, she's not that much older than me, and she's writing about this, and there's, whatever the situation is in the book, because we get ready to talk about that in a minute. You know what? I'm seeing some experiences in there that could be me or what have you. So you just never know who you're touching whenever you're putting your work out there. I mean, that's being in anything that's media related or communication related. One of the beautiful things is you really do get a chance to leave a legacy. You may wind up 100 years from now, your books may wind up in somebody's attic or in one of them in a trunk or somewhere, and you'll be dead and gone, but your book is still here. Folks will pick that up. Who is Krista Cook? It doesn't matter. They still have your storyline. So being in media, or being in writing, being in publishing, or having books out there, once you put a book out there, it's out there forever. There is no, it disappears off the face. There's always going to be a copy of your book somewhere.
I know. That's one of the exciting things I thought about it, that writing from a younger age, I'm like, this will always be around.
Right. Yeah, it will. I mean, once a book, particularly now with the digital age, maybe it might be a little bit, but if it's printed, if it's in paperback or hard copy, there's always going to be a copy of that book somewhere floating around, because books get passed along too. And so you just never know where it's going to wind up, where your story is going to wind up, where the message is going to wind up, which kind of now leads me to your first publication. And we were talking about this a little bit before we went on the air. Your first publication was I Hate Gray. Where did that title come from, and what is that all about?
I came up with that title probably at either 17 or 18, where it really depicted being in the in-between black and white, where as growing up, I learned that all decisions are not black and white. I've always kind of felt indecisive and in between one decision or another. And now those were the times where I felt the most anxious, where I felt the most paranoid, or just the most uncomfortable. And I hated it. So that's where I came up with I Hate Gray. I hate being in the in-between. I like to just know. I like to feel confident in decisions. Anything other than something that is concrete to me made me feel uncomfortable. So that's where I came up with I Hate Gray.
And what are some of the experiences, and what message would a young person get from that? And do not tell the whole, because at the end of the day, we want folks to buy the book. So we don't want you to give it all away, but kind of give a brief overview as to what is the message that you're looking for somebody between 16 and 25 to get?
I would say the overall arching message is to really engage your brain more than you engage the way you feel. We're always taught to follow your heart, which is true. You should be able to feel things, and you should be able to feel them in their fullness as well. But don't let the way you feel about anything, whether it's school, someone you're interested in dating, a job, outweigh what you know.
That's interesting you said it, because I was just having a conversation with someone. I said, use your heart and your head. Use both.
When those two align, those typically come with the best decisions. When my heart and my brain are aligned about a decision, I'm excited, I feel energized, and I feel confident in what I'm going into. It's the moments, like I said, in between, in that gray, where I'm debating something I know and debating something I'm feeling, and I'm stuck in between both. It's almost like you're in a wilderness time period.
Correct.
And until you make a concrete decision, you will be stuck there. And the things that happen to you during that wilderness time period are typically ridiculous.
Yes, they are. Trust me, taken from one who has been in a wilderness experience now for the last year or so. Thank God coming out of it, but I know exactly what you're talking about.
Because you're trying to, it's like a jigsaw puzzle. You're trying to see what works, what doesn't. You're testing things. You're testing people in your life to see what fits, what is going to be the best next move for me. And I felt like that at jobs, where you are at a job, you kind of hate it, but sometimes you're wondering, is there another job that's going to be a better fit? Every place sucks, because that's how you feel as a young person.
Correct.
You're not making any real money. You're probably still debating, is this the right move? Are these the right people I want to be connected to in the professional world? And then you're going on interviews. But even when you're going on interviews, you still have a job. So you feel obligated to do the job that you're currently doing, but then you're also trying to almost create a sense of loyalty with your future employer. You're researching that employer. You're trying to get connected with people who work in that industry. You have 1 foot in and 1 foot out. Until you have both feet firmly planted in your next phase, you are in murky waters.
Correct.
And you're almost thinking, am I going to sink or am I going to swim?
That was a good choice of words when you said 1 foot in and 1 foot out. And yeah, that is a very interesting feeling to say to others, because you really want to, like, look, I need to get my foot out of that one so I can get both feet in this. And so it's kind of like, and like, you're right. While that 1 foot is in one and 1 foot is in the other, it is a murky time. You're absolutely right. So we were talking whenever, prior to us coming on the air, you were saying the first book, the one that we're talking about right now, I Hate Gray. Did you say you self-published that?
Yes, so that was a self-published novel. And I didn't know anyone in the publishing industry at the time, but I knew I had a body of work that I wanted to put out into the world. And I almost compare it to the music industry in a sense, because I knew more about the music industry than the publishing industry at the time. So I always say I Hate Gray is like my mixtape, and then Growing in the Gray is my album.
So when you, that's a good analogy. Good analogy. When you went down that road of self-publishing, because some folks in the listening audience are teeter-tottering on whether they want to become or whether they feel they're an author or not. They're trying to figure out, well, how do I get published? How do I go about this whole thing called writing? How do I get a book out there? What kind of advice or guidance would you give someone sitting in the audience that might be thinking, you know what, I want to do what Christian did? What would you tell them?
For advice for writing or publishing specifically?
Both.
Okay. So my advice for writing is to write. Journaling was my way of even beginning to find my voice as a writer. Whether some days I just write lists. I literally will go to a coffee shop somewhere, look around my settings, see what I'm seeing, and write what I'm seeing. It's just a practice writing settings, so be able to fully describe them. I like to go. I tried to travel as much as I could before COVID. I'm a few countries behind, but having different life experiences helps to make my writing richer. I personally don't like anything boring. That's just the best.
I know that's right. I'm right there with you on that one.
I like to try new restaurants. I like to try different types of foods. I like to travel. I like to meet new people. All of these experiences that I've had made me have the willingness to even feel like I had something to say. Because if I woke up and saw the same things every day and talked to the same people every day, never moved away, never made any noise or disrupted any way the course of my life would have gone, I would have never felt the need to share my writing. If I still was somewhere in Farmington Hills, Michigan, going to Dairy Queen after work or school with my friends, never met anyone new, went to the same church my whole life, I would have never published a book. I would have had nothing to say.
Correct.
I would have maybe written and continued to journal, but I would have never felt the courage or the need to put a body of work out into the world. So I would say diversify your experiences if you want to be a writer, and also just write. Don't make excuses. Even if it's just a note on your phone. Sometimes I write in my notes. If it's just like something quick and kind of witty that I thought about and I don't have a pen or anything around me, it'll go a note on my phone, or I might text an idea to someone. I like to throw ideas out there, put something up on my Instagram story to see what people are feeling, if they like it, if they think that's interesting. So that's something I do. As far as publishing goes, LinkedIn is the best way for me to connect with professionals. So if you want to either learn about publishing, I would say connect with people within the publishing industry. Start researching. I feel like because I work in public relations, I research all day.
Right.
Like that's a big part of what I do. And it's carried into my personal life as well. So if you want to get in the industry, you know people within the industry. Start asking questions. Self-publishing could be the best route for you if you want to have a little bit more control of your word choice and what you want to put out in the world. But there's also better self-publishers than other self-publisher companies. So look at reviews. Did other people have positive experiences going through that route? If you want to go the traditional publishing route, who are the best agents in the industry that could represent your work? Now, I personally don't have an agent, but I do have really great publishers and a great publicist who's helping me along my journey. So everybody has a different road, but researching and putting yourself out there and network.
Well, you're absolutely correct. And in terms of having various experiences to write about, I remember I've interviewed Omar Tyree a couple of times, 2 or 3 times Omar has been on the show. And I remember asking him, how do you get your ideas? And he said something very similar. He said you might be riding on the subway, might be riding on the train. He watches a lot of movies. So those kind of like prompts his imagination in terms of what his storylines are going to be. And you're absolutely right in terms of networking. Now, LinkedIn is a wonderful. I'm on there, and while I've taken a social media hiatus over the last couple of weeks, LinkedIn is one I will pop back in every now and again, and I'll friend somebody or connect with somebody rather, because I think there's connections on LinkedIn. And I will connect with somebody because, again, you never know when you can reach out to somebody. Now, this is another thing that is a wonderful thing. And again, going back to you're 25, so you grew up in this era of that. When I was a kid, 10, 11, 12, 13 years old, all of this stuff that we have now did not exist. Google did not exist. LinkedIn did not exist. Facebook did not exist. None of this stuff existed. And we did what we call snail mail. We wrote letters to whatever, like I used to write letters to my favorite football team, the Pittsburgh Steelers or the Yankees or whatever. Never hear anything back. All right? Never hear anything back. Now, when you go to one of these social media sites and you hit somebody up, regardless of how famous they are or are not, you get a response. Many of my guests that I've gotten on the show has come from reaching out to them through social media. And once I say I'm a radio talk show host, it's like the floodgates are open. Like they want to talk to me and we can get scheduled, so forth and so. I've had Thelma from Good Times on here. I've had Newt Gingrich's daughter on. I've had Judge Hatchett on here. I've had Nikki Giovanni on here. I've had some top line round the world folks. I've had an ambassador from the United States on here. He was ambassador under Bill Clinton for Africa. And so I've spanned the gamut from local to internationally known basically through social media. And where I'm going with this is, as a young person today, and I tell my kids this in school all the time, if you know what your interest is, there is nothing stopping you from reaching out to someone who does it and say, I'm in 7th grade, 8th grade, high school and I want to do what you do whenever I'm an adult, I guarantee you the person is going to get back to you. And if they can't, they will refer you to someone you can speak with. Because the one thing across the board, people love talking about themselves and what they do. If a child comes to me and says, Mr. Medley, I want to be a principal one day, you can rest assured that child's going to get some time. Okay, Mr. Medley, I want to be a radio talk show host one day. You can rest assured that child is going to get some time. So folks will respond when folks are asking questions about who they are or what they do, to your point. So for those of you out there who want to be writers, you go on something like LinkedIn, and like Christian just said, you reach out to publishing companies, you reach out to PR people, you reach out to other authors. And that's how you start making your connections and your network. Now, by the way, and I meant to say this earlier, you came to me through one of my favorite people, and she's now Dr. Pam, but Pam Perry. And Pam and I have, been working with each other for some years now. And I tell her all the time, there are two publicists who have carte blanche with me, and Dr. Pam is one. And so anybody she recommends, I don't even have to vet them. I'm like, they're in, just, let's get the date together. So whenever she sent me your name, I was like, let's just get the date going. But in terms of, I love Dr. Pam. I knew her before she was Dr. Pam. I remember when she received the doctorate. So I was on her show. I've been on her show, and I'm still trying to get her to be on mine. She hasn't done that yet, but I'm going to get her. But in any event, anybody that Pam recommends, they are on. Like I said, I don't even have to vet them. But that's how it's done. That's a long way of saying that's how you break into the business.
Yeah, and I even, I think I expressed this to Pam when I was reaching out to her to represent me. I pretty much told her, I'm like, yes, I work in PR, but you have a bigger name than me. I respect what you do. You do publicity for books specifically, and anything that she tells me to do, even when I'm having the busiest day at work, at my day job, she'll shoot me over some things to listen to or to connect with or do this, do that, and the other. I'm going to do it because I even told her that I just felt appreciative that she even chose to represent me after I didn't have the best experience the first time with my first publishers. That's why I just chose to come out with another book. And it took me a while to come out with publishers that I felt like understood the vision of where I wanted to go with my career.
Correct.
I didn't want to be just some indie author who came out with a book, it made a little bit noise, picked up minimal press, and then go away and maybe just sell some books from here. I'm like, I want to be a well-known, respected author. They didn't kind of understand the publicity aspect of it. And working in PRs, I write for big brands and understand what branding and having a notable name does for you. Like, okay, next time I go around, I'm going to have to find someone who understands that vision specifically. And thankfully, I found Pam and we were able to connect, and I really love working with her because she's such a knowledgeable person. And I love being around people who I can learn from. It's just extremely refreshing to be continuously poured into. And I hope that Pam is proud to represent me. We haven't talked about that, but I hope so.
I tell you what, they used to have an ad campaign that says, you got the right one, baby. Well, you got the right one, baby, in Pam. I can tell you that right now. There are only two people, that whenever they give me a guest, I don't vet them. That's Nikki Woods. Nikki used to be the PR person for Tom Joyner, and Pam. So Pam and Nikki are the only two that whenever they text me or they email me, I don't even question it. Like I told you a couple of minutes ago, just let's set the date. Now, there's something else significant that you just said too. If you were not satisfied, there is no problem. There's nothing wrong with saying, I need to change. I need, this is not a very good fit. Well, that's nothing personal against you. It's just not a good fit. I need somebody, exactly what you just said, that can move my vision the way I'm looking for my vision to move. And so there's nothing wrong with trying various companies out. Like, okay, I tried you. It didn't work out the way I thought it would be. So, you know what? I need to seek and see if I can find somebody that has a little bit better fit. Sounds like that's what you did. And if you landed on Pam, like I said, as that ad campaign said, you got the right one, baby. Because Pam, I mean, like I said, very professional. She's very well connected also. In terms of folks out there in the business, extremely well connected. And so I guess some of our we have mutual acquaintances like Dennis Kimbrough, one of my fraternity brothers. She's with him as well. She's connected with Dennis Kimbrough. Dennis is big with, Think and Grow Rich, Black Choice, and some other books that he's written. And so yeah, you went the right one. I can tell you that right off the bat. And I will say this: if she recommended you to me, then she's proud to be working with you.
Oh, that makes me happy to hear.
She's doing her job. She's getting you out there.
Yes, I didn't want her to regret taking a chance on me. And that's just like with anywhere I'm at the PR and marketing agencies that I worked for, I've always felt grateful for anyone extending an opportunity to me. And I take a lot of pride in the work I produce. So I just always like to be a valued member or an asset in whatever field or whatever I'm doing.
And you know what? That is the exact way it ought to be. I'm gonna tell you again. If I had more younger folks, because I don't bash young people per se. However, I understand why people do. But for that matter, I can bash old people because some of us ain't, where we need to be either.
Let's flip the script there for a second. Sometimes old people are in the way of our advancement from time to time. But I didn't want to go there.
No, see, I'm very transparent. I'm very upfront. The older I get, the less filter I have. I call it as it is. So some of us are just as bad. We're always bashing the young people. We don't realize we were just as bad as they were when we were their age, if not worse. And so, but we do need more people who talk like you're talking this morning and think like you think. Because if we did, it would be less opportunity to bash. Unfortunately, you do have a lot of irresponsible young people out here. And they are. And some of that comes along with youth. Some of that comes along with that as the older you get, the more wisdom you get, the more experience you get, so forth. And some of it is not.
More of it is due to inexperience and exposure.
Correct.
If you don't have experience and you're not exposed to opportunity or knowledge, then of course you're going to move a little bit more thoughtless than someone who has experience and who has knowledge poured into them. And the only reason I'm able to think the way I do today, I would say, thankfully I continued the path I was on from my upbringing. But my grandfather, my grandmother, my mom, my dad, my raising, my background has a heavy influence on how I operate in the world today.
Absolutely.
I randomly text my siblings and say, the reason we think adulthood is trash is because we actually enjoyed our childhood.
Correct.
I've had, and I was taught a lot. So anytime I meet someone new or make jokes and say I hate, sometimes I don't even like being around people my age sometimes because in these 20s, it's a lot of childhood trauma that's coming out.
Correct.
And because I've had a lesser amount of traumatic experiences, I carry myself a specific way. But if they had similar upbringings and exposure and education and experience, they would too. It really is sometimes it's just really luck of the draw sometimes.
Correct.
You can't help where you're from. You can't help what your parents went through and what they exposed you to. But you do have the opportunity and the ability to change the course of your life if you want to. My grandmother always asked this question, do you will to be made whole? If you do will it, and that's something you care about that much to complete yourself and to nurture yourself, you will do the steps necessary to do so.
No, you're absolutely. I'm sitting here laughing with the mic button off because that is one of my favorite stories in the Bible. Your grandmother's right on point. Because Jesus comes to that man who's been laying by that pool for 38 years and asked that very question your grandmother said. And what the man started doing was babbling a bunch of excuses. And Jesus, for the most part, and I'm paraphrasing, was like, no, that's not the question I asked you. I didn't ask you all that. I asked you, do you want to be made whole?
Yeah.
So to your point, either the answer is yes, I want to be whole, or you make a bunch of excuses as to why you're not whole. Now, if you're going to just sit there and make a bunch of excuses, then you're still going to be there. However, if you're not going to say, yes, what do I need to do? What do I need to do? That's different. And you're absolutely right, because this is the thing. And I've been blessed to have a childhood exactly what you're describing with me too. Thank God, because folks who have been traumatized as kids, it impacts them as adults in so many ways that really not works for them. But it stems back and goes back to childhood. And who you are or what you experience as a child, make no mistake, it's going to impact you as an adult. There is no way to get around that. And you're absolutely right. It's luck of the draw, or we're blessed, or however you want to phrase it. And because you're right, we don't get to pick our parents. We don't get to pick where we're from. And I always say no child, us included, asked to come here. And so in terms of our various experiences, what folks experience as a child will impact them, especially if it was childhood trauma, if it was anything along those lines of multiple traumas or whatever, it impacts them and how they relate to folks whenever they're an adult. So it really does come down to experiences and what you've had, so forth and so on. So I tell you, we're going to shift gears a little bit to your second one, because I know you did the first. And the only other thing I will say about self-publishing is with self-publishing, when I first started this show back in 2001, Vanity Press and self-publishing and all that was just kind of coming on board. And the advice I always give folks who self-publish is you have to be just as professional as if you was with a big house, because no one wants to be trying to read something and there's grammatical errors in there, punctuation errors in there, spelling errors in there. In other words, just because you self-publish, don't think you can put out some crap and everybody's going to buy it.
Exactly. Self-publishing has come a very long way. That's why I say if you want to go that route, just research the best, like a self-publishing agency, a publishing house that fits your needs, your price point, and it's professional, like you said.
No, correct. And so, but now you've moved to your second book. Now, what's the title? Because the second book also has the word gray in there.
Yes. So, Growing in the Gray. Based off what I told you, I'm really excited about Growing in the Gray. It comes out September 6th of this year. We're about 6 weeks away. I think about it every single day. I really wish the world could just read it already, because I've been reading it for a long time now, and I'm excited for people to get their hands on it, because in my opinion, this is the best body of work that I've put out to date.
All right.
Now, I Hate Gray got some good reviews on Amazon, and people from all different walks of life enjoyed it. Now, like I expressed to you, that I felt like when I wrote I Hate Gray, I didn't get the exposure I needed. So I'm like, okay, this book is good, but I wrote it as a teenager. How would I have written this book today, being 24 at the time, because I did start writing it in March of last year. So it's the way I describe, like I told you, I felt like I Hate Gray was my mixtape, Growing in the Gray is my album. Growing in the Gray is a deluxe, higher quality version of I Hate Gray. It has like 100 or so more pages than I Hate Gray, and each scene in I Hate Gray that's still included in Growing in the Gray, it has so many different added elements that I either self-censored myself with adding because I was younger and kind of afraid to touch the topic, or something that I just kind of forgot about. Because when I was reading I Hate Gray at the beginning of last year in 2021, I'm like, there's a lot of things I could add here. It kind of just started as a thought. And I literally took the copy that I have here and started writing inside the copy of the book. Like every time I would read through the chapters, I'm like, I would ask myself questions at the end and write the questions down. I'm like, I should answer these questions in the next book. Like, keep the basis of I Hate Gray. Like, I Hate Gray is like a fast food version of Growing in the Gray. Growing in the Gray is that 5-star Michelin meal. Nothing was missed. Everything was hit. We have everything described. We have richer character backstories. And I'm really, like, excited is an understatement about how I am for this to be released out into the world. I'm very proud of this body of work.
And you said that comes out September 6th?
Yes, September 6th.
All right, that's easy for you to remember because I have a cousin who has a birthday on that date. So that'll be easy for you to remember. And it's going to be available on Kindle as well?
Yes.
Okay. Well, I'll have to make sure I download it when it comes out. Because it's interesting that you use the word growing in there, because I read something not long ago, the difference between falling in love and growing in love, that they're two different things. And what the author of that particular article and some articles since then, it says it is better to grow in love than to fall in love.
Yes, and my grandfather taught me that when I was a child, because my grandfather is a teacher. So I get a lot of, like, my wisdom from the things he's taught our church and myself from attending.
Did you say he was because you faded out of the phone? You say he was a preacher?
Yes.
Okay, so all right, then you know of this wisdom that I'm speaking of. Then.
Yes. So him discussing that, and I don't want to give too much away because
don't, because in a few minutes I'm gonna give you an opportunity to promote the launch and when it's coming out and how folks can get it, how they can get in touch with you. So don't give too much of it away. We want folks to buy it.
Okay.
So no, now give the title away and all. It's Growing in the Gray. So the first book is I Hate Gray, and then the second book is Growing in the Gray.
Yes, and the difference between the titles is when you're younger, you think more simplistically, where it's just like, I hate this, I don't like this, I love this, I like doing that. As I got a little bit older, I realized that I just was going through growing pains.
Correct.
It's not like what happened to me was painful, but it was pain with a purpose connected to it. It wasn't like, oh, I went through this experience, I hated it, I learned nothing. I realized that I was learning so much and I was being poured into so much. And as I was growing through uncertainty. And even though uncertainty isn't something people feel comfortable with, and like how you were saying earlier, we have no control. And as I'm getting older with each age, I'm letting go more and more and more.
No, I like the way you just said that, pain with a purpose. And that's a different perspective to have to look at things that way, because, at the end of the day, you got to go through it. We really, like I said, we really don't have a choice. Some things you just don't have a choice with, no matter how much you want to have that choice with, you just don't have it. So in a lot of instances, it is like you said, pain with a purpose. Last week, I read from a book from a guest I had on my show some months ago, and the particular passage that I read said sometimes the rejection is God's protection. So sometimes we go through these experiences and we're sitting there wondering, God, what the heck? And not realizing, like you just said, it's pain with a purpose, or as Letitia Nicole would say, the rejection is God's protection. So, again, going back to the growing in the gray, and I didn't want to make this analogy because I don't want to make I Hate Gray, because I'm listening to your analogies. It's like the mixtape versus the album. So what came to my mind when you were saying that was, all right, we're talking growing in the gray is like Ruth Chris Steakhouse versus I Hate Gray is McDonald's. And so I don't know if it's that far of a dichotomy or not, but those two, extremes came to my mind as you were sharing what you felt. One was the mixtape, the other one is the whole album, is the real deal. But I would suggest folks get both. Now, is it one of those situations wherein you can, like, I just finished watching, I've seen it 3 times now, Top Gun Maverick. If you've seen Top Gun 1, everything that went on in Top Gun Maverick will make perfect sense of you. However, you could see Top Gun Maverick as a standalone. Can you read Growing in Gray as a standalone, or would it make more sense to you if you read I Hate Gray first?
Growing in the Gray is a complete standalone.
Okay.
If you wanted to see my progression as a writer and you were just interested in me and my backstory, then yes, read I Hate Gray, and then when you read Growing in the Gray, you'll be like, wow, you can see the difference of being considered a good writer as a teenager, and then continuing that craft for years, and here you come again. It's just so much more of a richer experience.
All right. Well, we are down to the last of our interview. The last thing I do for every interview to close out is I give the author an opportunity to promote. Now, this is the only exception. You can say anything you want with the exception of a dollar amount. Because at that point, when folks get in touch with you, or if they decide to order a book, they can decide for themselves. However, anything else short of that, I'm going to turn the mic off, and you have the next couple of minutes as we wind down to promote I Hate Gray as well as Growing in Gray and anything else you want to promote. So I'm going to turn the mic off now, and with the exception of a dollar amount, the mic is yours.
Well, I just want to say thank you for having me on your show first. That's the first statement that I want to say. I've had so much fun. Like, this just felt so conversational, like you said. I really enjoyed my time here this morning with you. You can purchase I Hate Gray right now on Amazon. And if you're in Chicago, you can pick it up at a few local bookstores, Quimby's Bookstore in Wicker Park. You can also pick it up at Volumes Bookstore in Gold Coast and Sam Myers Bookstore in the South Loop. Glowing in the Gray will be available for purchase September 6th, so mark your calendars. I'm really excited for it to be out in the world. And you can go on my website, craftedbychristian.com, for monthly blog posts and any other updates about me.
What was the website again?
craftedbychristian.com.
Okay, crafted by, all one phrase. There are no spaces in there. craftedbychristian.com.
Yes.
All right, everything's together. They're all connected. There are no spaces, no underscores, none of that. Everything is there. Go there and find out more about Christian, as well as how you will be able to purchase both of the books, not just one, but both of them. I'm really big into supporting my guests and the authors, so I will be down especially if they're available on Kindle. If they're not, I'll just order it. But on my iPad, I have like 2,000 plus books.
Oh, wow.
So
that's amazing.
Yes. So in terms of, like, again, supporting artists and just loving to read, being an avid reader, as you were saying, certainly that is me. And so I like to support our artists, and I always encourage our listening audience to do the same thing. The titles of the book are I Hate Gray and then Growing in Gray. So
yeah, Growing in the Gray.
Growing in the Gray. Well, Christian, I thank you so much again. You said the morning is your time, so that's okay. I mean, that worked then, because some people, they're like night people. They're like bats, and they want to sleep all day. And then there are other people who are morning people, and they're up at the crack of dawn, and they go to bed early at night. So, in any event, I thank you so much for joining me. And again, I'm going to have to call up Dr. Pam, or either text Dr. Pam, and at the end of the day, sometime before the weekend is out, I will send you, because I archived the interviews on my YouTube channel. So you'll get the YouTube link as well as an MP3 link. And when you get those, you do what you want with them. They're yours.
Awesome. I can't wait to promote this on my various social media channels. This is my first radio interview, so I'm excited.
All right. Well, you know what? I'm glad. Yeah, you know what? You are a PR and a marketing person, so I'm going to be real glad to get the links to you. Get them out to as many places and people as possible. All right. Have a wonderfully blessed day. Thank you. Thank you so much again for appearing on the show, and I will be in touch with you and Pam.
Thank you.
All right. Take care now.